Lovely to have you all join us for the last hot take of the year. Super exciting. Everything's kind of winding down and we're already looking at some super cool new topics for next year. And then we've got a great topic and a great panel today to talk to us. So if you haven't joined a hot take before, these are where we get excellent experts from our network of businesses who are going to kind of teach us about something new and exciting in sustainability, or kind of a topic that we've heard coming up in the news a lot. A little bit of people bring me things that they'd like to hear about, or kind of news that I'm seeing around, and I gather this panel that we can ask questions to, and they can kind of give us an expert insight to what we should know about these new kind of topics that are emerging within the sustainability space. As we know that things are changing quickly and new things are appearing all the time. So this is a great place to come to kind of keep up with the latest news within the sustainable industry. So today our hot take is, are we in a climate cash-tastrophe? So kind of looking at how does the finance sector interact with climate change? And what we've done with our speakers today is we're kind of starting, Karen is going to be our first speaker. She's from Mindful Money, and we're doing a big zoom out look at the overall system, then a bit of a zoom in, and Rohan's going to speak. He's from Venture Capital, and then an even bigger zoom in, and Mark from Cleanery is going to speak, and we can kind of hear a really clear business, how it's affecting people on the ground. So without me talking for too much longer, I'll just say that there's lots of time at the end. Each presenter will speak, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So please take note of any questions you have. Also feel free to pop them in the chat throughout the presentations, and then we'll get to them at the end. And at the end, you're also more than welcome to pop your camera on and your microphone on and ask the questions out loud to our panel. So Karen, if you're ready to kick us off, I'll pass along to you.
Thanks, Ayla. Great to be here today. Kia ora koutou, ko Karen Swainson taku ingoa. As Ayla said, I'm from Mindful Money, which is a charity with a vision to make money a force for good. So no small vision there. So I'll just share my presentation. Yeah, so I'm not sure how many of you know about Mindful Money. So I'll start with a little bit about what we do, and then potentially open your eyes to the opportunity you've got to take an easy action to make sure that you're using your money to support a better world as well. So do you know what your money's supporting? I'll just start with some basics. So most people in New Zealand have a KiwiSaver. There's 3.8 million Kiwis that have a KiwiSaver, and many people as well have investment funds, are invested in investment funds. So a lot of people haven't kind of figured out what that actually means. So apologies if I am teaching granny to suck eggs here. I hate that phrase. What funds do is they invest your money, which is all amalgamated with everybody else's money, into companies. So your KiwiSaver fund is invested in companies, often hundreds of companies. And if you're investing in a company, you're supporting that company and you're giving it social license to operate. So that's the premise on which we're talking here. So, and New Zealanders want to invest ethically. From the annual research that we do with the Responsible Investment Association of Australasia, we can see that the majority of Kiwis expect their KiwiSaver funds and investments to be invested responsibly and ethically. If they're not, they want to change them, and yeah, they want to see a positive difference being made from the way that their money's being invested. What we also see is that the biggest barriers to investing ethically are consistently a lack of independent information about where their funds are invested at the moment, and how they might be able to invest them more ethically, and the lack of time available, because it's pretty tricky comparing all these different funds out there, and there are hundreds of funds. So the research also shows what people care about most, and what they don't want to invest in. So you might guess human rights violations. We're kind, and we don't want human rights violations to be our money to be perpetuating those. Labour rights abuses, environmental damages of different kinds, etc. So there's lots of things there that we don't want to be investing in. So, and relevant to this in terms of the climate cash-tastrophe, fantastic pun there, 73% of New Zealanders don't want to be investing their money in fossil fuels. It's actually a lot lower than I would expect, but I wonder how many people don't kind of associate fossil fuels with climate change still. So what we do at Mindful Money is we actually analyze all the funds. So yeah, there are coming up to, I think, well, there's about 800 funds in total in New Zealand, and we're in a really good situation in New Zealand. It's quite unusual. We can actually, but twice a year, the funds have to disclose exactly what they're investing in. So what we do is we take those funds and we analyze them. And we have a list of what we call our exclusions, which is the bad companies. And we map those funds, the companies that they're investing in, against those bad companies. That simplifies a very complicated process. And we're in the process of doing that at the moment for the data that came out in September. So what we can show is what these funds are actually investing in. So this is the data from the end of March. And as a total, this is about 7% of the total KiwiSaver funds. And bear in mind that there's $92 billion invested in KiwiSaver. Well, that was in March. So there are billions of dollars invested in these companies that people don't want to be investing in, but people just aren't aware of where their money's going. So the biggest one is companies that test on animals. That's non-pharmaceutical. So it's beauty products and things like that. And then fossil fuel companies is not too far behind. So $1.3 billion being invested of KiwiSaver fund money into fossil fuel companies. Specifically about climate change, last week, as part of the Aotearoa New Zealand Investor Coalition for Net Zero, catchy name, we launched an annual report. This is our second annual report on the state of net zero pledges made by wealth managers, asset owners, and fund managers. And when it comes to reducing emissions across investment portfolios, New Zealand is trailing Australia, and Australia in turn lags leaders in the EU. So yeah, only 26% in New Zealand have got a portfolio net zero target of 2050 or sooner. So we need to see more action here. And one way we can do that as individuals is advocate and tell whoever our provider is that we want to see further investment here in the right place. So and looking at specifically oil and gas companies and the value of those over the last 10 years, you can see that actually they're not a good investment anyway, even if you're thinking about returns. So the top line there, the turquoise line, is sort of the S&P 500. So that's your average list of companies. And the blue line is your oil and gas companies. So whilst there has been a bit of an uptick this year because of the war in Russia and the energy crisis, then prior to that, there was absolutely no reason financially to be investing in oil and gas companies either. One way people like to think about these things is carbon footprint. And we've done some very conservative analysis. There are other organizations around the world that say your investments are, and where you invest your money is, it could be 27 times more effective than all those other things. But we're saying that the average KiwiSaver in New Zealand has an emissions of around 2.3 tons of carbon dioxide each year. And then all your other things, your average is about 7.7 tons. So you can see that where your money is invested, that's just an average KiwiSaver of $29,000. So if you've got a lot more, then your footprint, your carbon footprint of your KiwiSaver is also a lot more. So you can see it makes a big difference. And we don't want that, do we? We want to live in a world where money is used for what people want. And that's what Rohan's going to talk more about. And we do have this sort of spectrum of impact, which helps you think more about where you can move along the spectrum in terms of your investments. So traditional funds on the left-hand side, they're not really thinking about the impact that they have on the environment and society. The next step would be to avoid harm, so to avoid those bad companies that we talked about. Another way is to engage with the companies if we feel like, so for example, there are some fossil fuel companies that are actually looking to change. So you might have fund providers that actually go and engage with them and help them along the road to renewable energy. There are others that we're not going to be able to change them. They're stuck in the mud, etc. And all the way along to the end, which is impact investment. And Rohan will talk more about that. So is now a good time to switch? Well, yes, it is. So ethical funds have been doing really well financially, and there's mounting evidence that shows that investing with ESG criteria, which I'm sure you all know is environmental, social, and governance criteria, it not only reduces risks, but it also delivers higher returns. And you can avoid investing your money in the companies that you wouldn't want to support any other way. Sure you're all aware there's a bit of a climate emergency going on, so and you can invest your money in funds that are taking action to avoid investing in fossil fuels, and instead they're engaging with companies to improve their performance and invest in climate solutions. And yeah, you can invest in companies that invest at least part of your funds in doing good. So despite some examples of greenwashing, there are innovators and leaders. So you can invest your in your KiwiSaver, etc., in those companies. So what we do is we're a charity, so it's all free what we do. We've got a website, and which I will go and show you now, which basically helps you to be able to look at what your current fund is investing in, and makes it really easy to get over those barriers of time and information to find a more ethical KiwiSaver. So hopefully you're able to see my website now. The website? Yep, awesome. Love it when technology works. So we're actually just about to launch our new website. So it's quite weird looking at this one again, because I've been looking at the new one all the time. But so this is our homepage of our website, and check a fund. So we'll just go and check a couple of KiwiSaver funds in here. So a couple of the really big ones. So for example, the ASB Growth Fund. So what you can see here is it shows you what sort of bad companies it's investing in. So in terms of fossil fuels, over 3% of the fund is invested in fossil fuels. Let's go and have a look at another one. Another really big one is the ANZ Growth Fund. And again, with the ANZ fund, we can see that over 2% of that fund is invested in fossil fuels. And these funds are really big. They've got sort of $3 to $4 billion in them. So 2 to 3% of $4 billion is a lot of money that these funds. So if you want to find a more ethical fund, actually, let's just go and have a look at actually one of these funds first. So you can get lots more detail on it. So this will actually show you the fossil fuel companies that this fund is investing in, the weapons companies, the gambling companies, etc. Some of these companies you may not have heard of, but our research triangulates lots of different kind of research from around the world. So yeah, some of these are obviously well known and some not so well known. And then there's lots of further information about the fund, whether they say that they're excluding various things. So this fund, the only exclusions it has is adult entertainment, tobacco, and weapons. But actually it does have a little bit of its fund in weapons, even though it has an exclusion for it. You can look at their past returns and how they do against the market average, what their top investments are, and what the investment mix is. But if you're not happy with what you're seeing, you might want to go and find an ethical fund, a more ethical fund. So you can have a play with this. And as I say, it is about to change, but let's say that I really don't want to invest in fossil fuels or human rights or weapons. and you can have a little look at what sort of approach. So yes, I really wanted to avoid those concerns. Selecting better companies would be good. But actually I'll go for higher past returns because that's after fees anyway. Sorry, I'm glossing over this quite quickly. I'm still very young, so I definitely want this fund for a long time. So then it will come back and it will show me the best funds that might fit what those values that I've put in. And you can go and have a look at what those funds are. I've probably gone way over my time, haven't I, Isla? So I'll stop there. And if there's more questions, then I can come back and talk more about that.
No, you're fine. Thank you, Karen. That was great. And I would second, it is so easy. I did it years ago using Mindful Money's. Yeah, choosing all the different bits, and yeah, you can kind of customize it for exactly what matters most to you. And then the switch over as well from what I was with to my new KiwiSaver was so easy. So great kind of place to start if you're just, this is a new topic to you. Mindful Money's website makes it super easy. So would definitely recommend checking that out. And we can pop it in the email I'll send out afterwards. I'll link all these things in for you guys. So thank you, Karen. I'll pass along to Rohan next.
Thanks very much, Ayla, and Ngā nui kia koutou, ko Rohan MacMahon tēnei. I'm Rohan. I'm one of the partners in the Climate Venture Capital Fund. And I think, you know, as Ayla said, as we sort of you know, take a tighter focus on these climate finance issues that we're grappling with, I'm kind of the next stage of the kōrero today. I do have a couple of slides which I will talk to very briefly, but we're basically just trying to give you that sort of lens from the overall world of capital that's out there, and looking at our fund as an example of one response to the challenges of climate change. And then Mark will help us to talk about how one company is actually making a direct impact. So I'll share some slides very briefly now, if that's okay. Hoping that is coming up now. Just got the chat in front of me as well. So this is Lake Tasman. Hopefully you could see it okay. You know, it didn't really exist a couple of decades ago, but sadly, thanks to climate change, you know, this is what glaciers look like these days. So we used to say that glacial rates of change were very slow. Now we have to kind of change our language because glacial rates of change are actually all too fast. So that's what this is all about. And then building on from what Karen was saying, you know, because we've been talking about climate response for such a long time, yet our emissions have continued to rise and rise and rise. You know, we know that the talking phase of climate response is coming to an end, and the acting phase is hopefully getting underway. The reason for that's very simple. If we want to achieve anything like a 1.5 degree outcome that was contemplated from the Paris Agreement in 2015, we have to make sure that emissions reductions are happening at a really discontinuous rate. To sort of see a linear change from a curve that's going up steeply and then starts to decline slightly is not going to get us anywhere near a net zero outcome by 2050. And in the meantime, every year that emissions are continuing at anywhere near their current rate, we're actually baking more temperature increase into the atmosphere. And so what we do need is rapid emissions reduction. So as part of putting the Climate Venture Capital Fund together, and I'll talk a bit more about what we're doing, we've thought deeply about how we could make that happen. And, you know, as venture capital investors, we're, you know, skilled at looking at new early stage technologies and hoping to see those accelerate and to help them really drive rapid emissions reduction. So that's kind of our work, if you like. But just to put that in context, this is very much what Karen was talking about as well. In order to see us, you know, adapt to climate change, we are needing to see an enormous amount of new capital in all asset classes go towards climate response in the next little while, and particularly through this decade, which we're now almost 1/3 of the way through. We're seeing a lot of capital get allocated towards climate response. That could be governmental response around adaptation programs and grants and things like that. It could be on the debt side. It could be lenders doing green bonds and sustainably linked bonds and loans and the like. But it's also on the equity side. And so we're part of a movement, I guess, of equity capital towards ESG investment. And then in my sort of neighborhood, we're looking at private capital, which is private equity and venture capital going towards clean tech investment. And it's this rapid growth that we expect to see and are already seeing in the 2020s, which is so necessary because we need to accelerate emissions reduction now. We can't afford to be decarbonising in 2049. We need rapid emissions reduction this decade to head off the worst impacts of climate change this decade. So that pushes us towards looking for faster responses in the short term. Which brings you to venture capital. So what we're doing here is looking for, we are not a charity, we are looking to make great returns for investors because we believe that the great returns are there to be made. And we also believe that people should expect their money to be working for them, and that philanthropic capital, while it exists, is not large in New Zealand. We think that people should be looking for returns from their money on the whole, and they certainly are. The reason for venture capital to sort of amplify that importance is really, in our case, is really the impact investment that Karen alluded to. And it's mentioned here with the words opportunity for direct impact. We basically can show you that the money that we're putting towards the companies that we invest in is going directly towards emissions reduction propositions. They're companies, and you'll hear from Mark shortly, who every day that they're working, every product that they sell is coming with emissions reduction sort of stapled into the proposition, which means that while we're looking for an investment outcome in terms of the dollars, we're also looking for an impact outcome in terms of emissions reduction. That's unusual here in New Zealand. We're the only fund of our kind that has that kind of mandate, and when we think that that's really important, we think it's set to grow, and we think that that will help to bring in more capital over a period of time as people wake up to that proposition. As Karen said, that report last week was pretty troubling. That showed a lot of larger fund managers and the like have yet to adopt a net zero commitment, let alone a net zero plan or specific investment into climate solutions. But that is what we are doing every day at the moment. And we expect to see that increase over time. It's pretty telling that the Net Zero Act was passed by Parliament 3 years ago, I think next month, or just about now 3 years ago, yet you're seeing only quite a small minority of large asset owners and fund managers have yet made their own net zero pledge, let alone their own net zero plan. And so we're encouraging those larger institutions to get with the program, and we certainly like what Mindful Money is doing to shine a light on the behaviour of KiwiSavers and other large funds that are in that space. And we see that there's growth there to be invested in coming soon. We're an experienced team, got too much grey hair on this page possibly, but it does mean that we think we have some skills in knowing what we're doing. And our fund does also have a specific climate impact committee, which is an external committee which has the right of veto over our investment decisions, and we task them with ensuring that climate impact is tangible and measurable, can be reported to our investors, and we've also asked them to veto any investment decisions that they think don't meet those criteria or have any material negative externalities. So it could be other adverse impacts on the world. We've invested in 4 companies so far. Our fund is still open for investment, so if anyone on the call would like to talk with us about that, I'd be very happy to follow up. I'll let the best go last because he's on the call. So we've invested with Cleanery, but just to round out the others, MGA Thermal is a renewable energy storage company in Newcastle, in New South Wales, doing some fantastic work. They currently have a trial with AGL, which is the largest emitter in Australia, runs a lot of coal and gas-fired power stations. We've invested in Liquium, which is a green ammonia technology company based out of Wellington. It's got a long roadmap, but ammonia is incredibly useful to the world, but also incredibly emissions intensive at the moment. And then finally, Zincovery, which is a Christchurch-based company, which is helping to recover zinc, particularly from galvanized steel. And zinc is incredibly emissions intensive to recycle at the moment. It's actually more emissions intensive to recycle than to mine at present. So that drives us towards looking towards that as a category that we can help out in. So thank you very much. I'll pass you over now to Mark, and thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Kia ora, thanks, Rohan. That was excellent. And yes, straight over to Mark.
Hey, kia ora everyone. So I'm following that, I guess, higher level overview of climate finance from Karen and Rohan. I'm going to take it down a few levels and show how this can help you clean your bench and wash your hands. make some easy sustainable changes in the home and business. But I guess also to demonstrate with I guess just our sort of small example, how climate finance makes a difference. Okay, so yeah, I'm the founder of Cleanery. So hopefully some of you have heard about us, maybe even enjoyed using our products. Massive thanks to those who have used them and do use the products. We're reinventing the cleaning and personal care category with truly effective, genuinely sustainable products delivered as a powder that dissolves in water. So this is an essay about the packaging problem that I wrote 28 years ago. And I included here not to show that I once got top marks in school, but to demonstrate that this problem's been around for a long time and that fixing it's one of the core reasons that Cleanery exists. So excessive packaging, and that exists across most consumer categories, right? And creates the obvious sort of waste disposal problems. But perhaps worse than this and more relevant to this conversation, researchers estimated that last year production and incineration of plastic pumped more than 850 million tonnes of greenhouse gases into the environment. And that's equivalent to 189 coal-fired power plants. And then by 2050, we keep going as we are now, those emissions will reach 2.8 billion tonnes. And so that's the same as 615 power plants. And plastic's only a small part of the packaging problem, of course. Many of the alternatives are even worse. So I wrote this essay 28 years ago, and another 28 years it'll be 2050. So if we keep going as we are now, there'll be a whole lot of broken climate pledges, and there'll be more plastic than fish in the ocean. Pretty scary. Cleaning and personal care is a $500 billion category, touches billions of lives each day, and yet it's an industry based on shipping this bulky packaging. Billions of bottles are manufactured each year, filled mostly with water, transported around the world, and discarded. Companies focus on cost savings, while our homes and environment filled with toxic and generally pretty ineffective products. So at Cleanery, we've reimagined the science, the manufacturing processes, the entire business model behind the cleaning and personal care sector. We've developed this range of incredibly effective household and commercial cleaners, beautiful hand washes, personal care products that leave your skin feeling clean and moisturized, but delivered as a powder that dissolves in water. So fill your bottle with water, empty the sachet of powder in, give it a quick shake, and it's ready to be used in exactly the same way as the old products we've replaced. These products are produced in a low energy, low emissions production process. We've got a factory out here in Avondale in West Auckland with more than enough capacity for New Zealand and Australia. But as we grow, this plant, this factory will be replicated and marketed close to customers, so further reducing the impact from shipping and transport. Super clean, super green. When we talk about super clean, we're talking about products that really work. So this example here uses our kitchen cleaner spray. So oil and carbon are baked onto a tile, and then they're cleaned using a standard process to compare the efficacy, to compare where they clean. So you might have seen some of the dissolvable tablets that are used to make cleaning sprays. Great concept, but unfortunately even worse at cleaning than some of the traditional eco cleaners. So you can sort of see there on those tiles, it didn't really take much of the oil off. Whereas a Cleanery test on the right, it's actually more effective than the traditional market-leading product. And super green, this means no emissions from shipping water around the world, plant and mineral-based formulations, lightweight, recyclable sachet, 99% less packaging than traditional products. So we're converting mainstream consumers and businesses to sustainable products. That's why we exist. So we've created an easy change to reduce the impact in the home and workplace. People get more effective products that are safer and cost less while being fundamentally better for the planet. It's like a no compromise solution that makes it easy for people to make the change. However, to get where we are now, to making this change easy for consumers has required a substantial investment on our part. I've needed to make a massive investment in R&D. In the team here, just in the factory here, we've got over 100 years of deep science and engineering experience. Countless more of the contractors have sort of supported us to get where we are now. We had to build an entirely new and novel manufacturing plant and all the capital that obviously goes with that. We're continuing to invest in sales to ensure that our products are available in mainstream supermarkets and retailers where people would need to buy these products and that they're available at the right price. We're continuing to invest in a brand that will win hearts and minds, create the behaviour shift needed to get people using these products. And as we replicate what we're doing here in Australia, or here in New Zealand and in Australia, as we replicate it into other markets, these costs are going to increase, right? So there's awesome returns, long-term financial returns, but it's also, it takes time and there's a lot of upfront investment to get where we are here, to get there. So because we want to move quickly, we want to create a positive impact globally, we're partnered with investors such as Rohan at Climate VC. So Climate VC bring the funds we need to grow, but I guess also the advice, connections and support to help us on the journey. That's not only going to deliver awesome financial returns, but also reduce the emissions, the waste and the toxic chemicals by enabling that sort of easy change that people are looking for. So hey, thank you. Hopefully that was a sort of a tangible example of how climate finance can make a difference. Really looking forward to the discussion and sort of learning about how it all fits together as well. So thanks very much.
Kia ora, Mark. Thanks for that. Yeah, really cool to see how that kind of directly can affect a business, or before it was even a business, having that kind of great advice and investment into it to get you to that stage. And congrats, I saw that you guys have been getting into more and more kind of supermarkets, so that's excellent to see it kind of hitting the mainstream shelves. And yeah, like you say, it's all those little actions individuals can take that will continue to kind of get them going with their climate action and other kind of sustainable behavioural changes.
Indeed,
Awesome.
thank you.
Do we have any questions? Feel free to start popping them in the chat, or you can jump on. I have a few that I noted, as this is definitely a newer area to me as well. So Karen, one of my questions was, why do you think, like, when you present how crazy this is, that I think most people wouldn't be aware that that's what their KiwiSaver is often automatically going towards. And when I've talked to people about it who weren't aware, they were quite shocked that that's what their money is going towards. So what is the barrier still for people not wanting to change or not doing the actual change, do you think?
I think it's time, the biggest barrier, because I mean, I'm assuming I'm pretty normal. You never know, but I've got a massive to-do list outside, you know, like an admin, personal admin. And if you know that your KiwiSaver is already somewhere safe and it's growing, then you've got to really care to get that to the top of your to-do list and actually change it. So, I mean, I think, you know, for us, we just want to make it as easy as possible for people. And it really does only take 15 minutes. I mean, you don't have to do a lot to move your KiwiSaver. Most of it happens behind the scenes, and the IRD deals with it all. And yeah, you just have to fill in the application form for your new provider. So it's pretty straightforward, but I think time is the biggest barrier. But yeah, I mean, there's research that the FMA did earlier this year, and it shows that people just aren't aware that we're out there, that we're there to help people.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing all we can to kind of grow that awareness. So yeah, if anyone's got any great ideas about how we get our brand out there, then let me know.
Yeah, well, I think as well, going away from today and just talking to the people in your life and saying, have you thought about where your KiwiSaver is and what that money is going towards? Because you're right, I think once people are aware of it and it's only 15 minutes, they're like, oh yeah, that's definitely a worthwhile action to take. But I don't think people would expect that that is what banks are currently doing. And then, yeah, you're right, the process is so easy, and then you can just forget about it again, but, you know it's in a good place. Awesome. We have a question from Marin here. He says, how is Money Matters or Mindful Money funded?
Well, we're a charity, so we do have some donations. We also run a seminar series each year, which we've just started last week. I'll put the link into the chat. And we run a conference and awards each year, and we get a lot of oh, somebody's just switched their KiwiSaver over. Yay! It was worth me getting up this morning.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And yeah, so we get a lot of sponsorship. We also, if people use our website and they go through our referral form, then we let the fund providers know, and they pay us a small fee for the privilege of having us sent them people, but actually that's not a huge amount of our funding. A lot of it is sponsorship and donations. Yeah,
awesome. Thank you, Karen. Mark, we have a question from Marsha here, who says that she'd love to try some Cleanery products. Which mainstream supermarket can she pick them up from?
Awesome, thank you, Marsha. Hey, so we're available online, cleanery.co.nz. Auckland, we've been in Faro. They've sort of, and a whole lot of other specialty stores that helped us out from the start. Rolling out to Pack and Save in New World in the South Island, rolling out to Pack and Saves right now in the North Island, available in every warehouse now, which is cool. And then through early next year, rolling out to the rest of the supermarket. So awesome if everyone can go and sort of support those that have, so that they will continue to stock us as a sustainable option.
Awesome, thanks, Mark. Rohan, I had a question for you. As obviously you're looking at that sort of business case, and it was great to hear from Mark, but if you're someone at home or sitting there thinking that you've had this great business idea that's sustainable and could fit in with the capital, a fund, what is kind of the process to getting in front of you guys to talk that through?
Yeah, well, I guess we're long-term investors, and we have got a lot of people who are approaching us at the moment, which is a great position to be in. Part of the reason we are in a climate cash-tastrophe, if that's the right term, is because there isn't enough capital in this space yet, which is not good for climate response, but is actually okay for someone like me because we have great ideas walking in the door all the time. We've been pretty picky so far, so just need to set people's expectations. You know, we've said yes to Mark and 3 others, but we've said no or maybe to a lot of others. What we do offer, though, is we're very happy to form relationships with people, to give them advice and to try to help them along that journey. It can be a long journey. It's often not I've got a great idea, you know, the phrase, 10 years to be an overnight success. Sometimes it does take a long time to realize a proposition or an idea, just like Mark's essay from back in school. The best ideas sometimes take a little while to percolate. So we're happy to meet people and to talk with them and to try to introduce them to others who might be able to help them. You know, we are open for business, but look, to be honest, there simply isn't enough capital in this space, and that's part of the reason we started this fund, but also it is the reason that we're actively trying to encourage more investment, whether it's through our fund or any other fund for that matter, because there is more to be done. I didn't mention it when I was talking earlier, but you know, if you look at climate action tracker, for example, that's an international study, sort of index, if you like, that talks about which countries are performing well on which kinds of climate response, and it rates New Zealand's level of capital availability for climate response as highly insufficient, and that means both public finance and private finance. And so that's really the reason that we have. That's the reason our fund exists, if you like, but it also is the reason for all of us to sort of get on board.
Right.
And look, I can pop my email in the chat if that's helpful, if anyone's got any bright ideas.
Yeah, great. Pop that in, and I'll also include some contact info in the follow-up email. We have a question here from Rob, and he's asking Karen, are there any discussions happening with government to make default providers sustainable funds for KiwiSaver?
Excellent question. Yes, actually, was it beginning of this year? The default providers did have to become, they have certain ethical rules around what they're allowed and not to do, and that includes they're not allowed to invest in fossil fuels now. I haven't actually checked specifically whether it has held up, and I should do, to see whether there are any default funds that have investments in fossil fuels. For those of you who don't know, a default fund is one that you end up in if you don't specifically choose your KiwiSaver when you join KiwiSaver. And there are, I think there's about 1 million people in default funds or something crazy. So yeah, it's pretty common, and that's where people just haven't given it any thought at all as to what fund they've gone into. When people are in default funds, they also tend to not be in a growth fund, and it's quite often young people who potentially should be in growth funds because they're going to be investing for the longer term. So yeah, if people are in default funds that you know, then it's good to recommend them to have a look at that.
Yeah, great, thank you. Rohan, we have a question here from Maren saying, what is the minimum investment amount and for how long is the minimum?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. So the Climate VC Fund is a wholesale fund. It's not a retail fund. So we have some special regulations that we have to comply with. So the minimum is 100,000 in total investment per investor, and we draw that down over a period of about 4 years. So essentially, it's 25% upfront, and then you would expect an annual payment or payments for the remaining 25% per annum through 2023, 2024, and 2025. That's to be honest, as I've been saying, the level of capital that we need to make this water work is substantial. So that's why one of the reasons that those sums are large, but also it's not a retail investment. So it's not like your sharesies or the like. So we do have to ask for experienced investors, and we're required to go through some compliance steps for that. The period of the fund is 10 years. We're already towards the end of the first year at the moment. And you're basically looking for returns to flow out to investors in the second half of the decade. So it's a relatively long-term investment. It's not something where it's very liquid, so it's not easy to send capital back to people promptly if they want to get out. So it's not suited for everybody, and most importantly, it's not suited for all of your portfolio. If you have the ability to invest directly, it's not something that's suited for all of your investments. It's more like a portion of your investment that you're comfortable to lock away for a period of time, knowing that you are looking for some good returns eventually, but you don't need your money back right now, and hopefully you're directing your impact in the right way in the meantime. Yeah, thanks very much.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, could you tell us a little bit about the process from, how long were you thinking of this idea, and what were the kind of key milestones in that timeline to get where you are today?
Yeah, good question. So thinking of how I could solve this packaging problem and develop a scalable, profitable, investable example of success in the circular economy for a long time. Settled on the cleaning and personal care, when you start looking at some of the numbers and the fact that that is a product that's primarily water, so crazy shipping water around the place, right? Settled on that and started doing deeper research on it probably sort of 2 or 3 years ago. And it was just like everything sort of based in COVID timeframes these days, right? So it was just before the sort of when COVID was becoming a thing that we were settling on some of the earlier research partners. So it's with some universities and a whole lot of individuals there. A whole lot of R&D, sort of taking it from a sort of a concept through to how do we go manufacture it, and then obviously having something ready for market. So we were selling online and in Baro around about a year ago. So it feels like a long time when you're in the middle of it, but then looking back, we've sort of achieved quite a bit in sort of 2.5 years or so.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Mark. It's kind of that thing that I know I talk to a lot of people who are somewhere along that process, and it's always good to keep encouraging them that often doing things sustainably or with those circular economy kind of principles in mind is harder, and so it's just good to always remind people it is worthwhile in the long run.
100%. It sort of takes time to develop anything that's sort of worthwhile. It's not a case of just going to a manufacturer in China and getting something off the shelf. There's a whole lot of sort of real R&D and development that needs to happen.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mark. Rohan, we have a question here from Joanne, and she's asked, can you talk about the risk of private investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the KiwiSaver side of things. I mean, if we saw more KiwiSavers going into this sort of thing, then it would just form a portion of their overall portfolios. And, because a lot of the KiwiSavers are so large, they could choose to put relatively small sums of money into funds like mine, and that would be a good outcome for all concerned. But because we've seen relatively little of that, most of our investors to date are smaller mums and dads and high net worth individuals and small family offices and the like. And for them, obviously feels more risky, if you like. The group that I'm part of, our sister fund is the Punakaki Fund, which has been running for 8 years, since 2014. And it has about 1,100 shareholders and investors so far. We're smaller, our funding is still coming in the door, but we have about 70 investors so far. It's not something that is without risk, but the main thing we're looking to do is to develop what you call a portfolio effect. The individual companies are early stage, and they are dependent on technology commercialization and business development and great marketing and all those sorts of things. But it's our job as the fund manager to choose wisely and then to advise those companies on how we can help them succeed together, and to go with them on that journey. And Mark's an example of that. What we do see, though, is that you would expect the nature of it being technology development is that not every firm is going to work out. And what you're looking for is a portfolio effect where those not so goods are outweighed over time by those that may do very well. What we'd expect to see, because we have the direct focus on climate impact, is that one or two things is going to happen with each individual investment. If a company doesn't work out for some reason, then we haven't saved a lot of emissions and we haven't got a good return on our investment for that particular company. But as I say, we expect that those not so good would be outweighed overall by those that would overperform, so that on average we're able to sort of reduce that risk across the portfolio and give everybody a good return and good climate impact on in totality.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, we have a question here of what is your packaging made of?
Yeah, good question. And we spend a lot of time. We get asked that a lot, and we think about it a lot as well. So the product's delivered in a little sachet. So first of all, 99% less packaging by weight. And then what we do with that last 1% is important. So it's made of it's soft plastic, so recyclable through the soft plastic scheme. We want to eventually be able to move that towards a paper-based sachet. Right now, that technology doesn't exist to have a paper-based sachet that would actually be recyclable through the paper waste stream. It would right now all the sort of similar type materials that we might use would be a combination of paper and film, and so it wouldn't be recyclable anywhere. And then there's compostable options, which don't work for mainstream because most people don't have a compost bin, and it doesn't actually add anything to the soil anyway. Commercial composters reject anything that looks like plastic. So continually being developed. Right now, the best option is the soft plastic recyclable sachet that's sort of super lightweight and protects the product and gets it to people safely.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mark. I think that we're coming to the end of the time, and to wrap up, I just wanted to say that I kind of bought this hot take. Rohan brought this idea to me, and I thought it was really great because finance for the normal kind of person often feels pretty hard to understand and too big. And I think that's a lot of what you see when people hear things like investments or looking at your KiwiSaver. It just feels a bit overwhelming. So people often kind of push it to the side. And so I wanted to kind of bring you guys together as that idea that we could look at the overall system, but also actions we can all take as individuals. Obviously, in the last since we've had COP recently and this climate emergency, and it's all feeling, again, it's always sustainability pretty overwhelming and can feel pretty dire. So is there things that you guys could kind of send the audience away with to think about, or actions they can take that can kind of bring it to an individual level of what we can all be doing to kind of do our bit? Feel free. Yeah, Karen, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think mine's quite obvious, isn't it? I think I've already done my call to action, really. Just go and check what your KiwiSaver or other investment fund is investing in. Use our website, mindfulmoney.nz, and see what it's investing in. If you're not happy with it, change it and cross it off your to-do list.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Karen. And you're right. I think that is definitely step one. It's probably most people's kind of first instance of kind of being into that investment world, and that's where you should start having a look first. Great. Rohan?
Yeah, I mean, I think further to that, each of us is privileged to have different roles. Like we can be consumers, we can be voters, and most of us have KiwiSaver, and some of us have other investments. So, if you care about something, then you should use whatever means are at your disposal to help push things in the right direction. So I hope you buy more of Mark's sachets, because I sure do. But if you have values that are in a particular neighbourhood and they're not reflected by your KiwiSaver, then you should change as quickly as possible. And if you think that direct impact is something that you're interested in on the climate side, then come talk to me. I think this is an area where people have actually been kind of a bit snoozy. And I think that's actually the whole climate capital problem, is that, there's a lot of, government should be doing more, but governments are doing a lot already. And of course they can do more, but they've got other priorities and there's an election next year and this cost of living crisis and the interest rates are going up today. So there'll always be other priorities, but we as individuals can take our own accountability for stuff that we care about and push it along.
Yeah, definitely. Mark,
And
anything to
add
add
to
there?
that, the more people that do change, then the more the fund providers will realise that they've got to wake up and change the way that they're investing money. So if you do move your KiwiSaver away from a fund that is investing in, for example, fossil fuels, then do tell them why you've left. I did that when I left Westpac a few years ago. And Westpac's improved a huge amount since then. And I'm thinking it's just because of my feedback. So
Yes,
yeah, it's worth telling
I
them.
love that. I think that's one of the most often pieces of advice I give people when they say, what can I do to help sustainability? Like, I feel so overwhelmed, and I'm like, talk about it with people. It could be talking to providers and saying, when you go and buy a product or food or anything, talking to the people or messaging the company, even on social media, and saying, hey, I don't understand why your packaging is like this, or why are you doing this? Or it's talking to your friends, it's talking to everyone, and trying to just keep it front of mind for people and offering each other those kind of easy wins. Yeah, Mark, do you have anything to add there?
But all of the above, really. Like, obviously buy Cleanery products, like, clearly. But no, like, more importantly, I think you do, like, where you spend your money, it is a big boat. Companies, businesses in general really do need to get on board and play their part in the climate change. Like, governments and philanthropy are only going to ever get us so far. So it's going to be businesses that are doing good that are going to have the real impact. And that's where people get to choose where they spend their money. And even just reducing consumption, right? You don't have to do everything. You don't have to change the world by yourself, but the small things you do have a big impact. Don't look too closely at Black Friday sales this week.
Yes, great. Yeah, good point. Yeah, think about what you buy, and remember, every time that you are spending money, you're kind of voting for the world you want to live in. So try and put that money into the good places, whether that's your shopping when you're going and buying cleaning products, or your KiwiSaver, or if you are in the realm to invest, what you're investing in. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much. This was our last hot take of the year, but please tune in early next year. We'll be starting them again, either end of January or early Feb. Feel free to send me ideas or questions or anything that you would like to see a hot take covering. And thank you so much for our panel of experts. Excellent to hear from 3 different kind of areas of the same topic, and I've definitely learned a lot. So really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to us today. Awesome. And
Thanks,
yes, we
Lola.
will be sharing this on our YouTube channel after, so that share it with anyone who you think needs to hear this conversation.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks very much,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Ka kite.